At home again. Let's come to Jaguar Land Rover. Jaguar Land Rover alone employs here in Coventry, the West Midlands, 40,000 people. Another 240,000 families depend on Jaguar Land Rover for their well-being. That's how big it is here. And I don't want to stop just at Land Rover and Jaguar and Land Rover, important though the two are, vital, traditional, brilliant British products, and paying tribute to them. I'd like to pay tribute in passing to the real vision that Ratan Tata has shown when he bought Jaguar and brought a whole new approach, a long-term patient approach, to Kumar Bhattacharya, whose engineering brilliance has informed the remarkable developments at the Warwick Manufacturing Group, and also to the managerial excellence that Dr. Ralf Schmeth has brought from Germany to our companies here. On that basis and the skills and the productivity of our workforce, we've rebuilt the industry. And now, that was after the devastation of the Thatcher years, we all remember so well, or most of us in the audience remember so well, the devastation of the Thatcher years. I remember it all too well during the 80s. One day it was one factory, one day it was Rover, then it was Morris Engines, then it was Triumph. Then we had the machine tool industry to go, following those. Every day you woke up, there's a new factory gone. That was what we've rebuilt it from, and now she's going to put all that at risk by the failure, the bungling failure, to get a full free trade deal for the motor industry. That's what we need, and that's what I'm here today to campaign about. That's what I've been campaigning in the constituency about, in the whole of Coventry about, and that's where we all agree. It's vital that the Tories, and Mrs May, here's what we're saying. Yes, there's nothing more British than a Land Rover or a Jaguar, but let's keep it that way. Let's keep it as successful as it is now, thanks to successive governments since the devastation of the Thatcher years, investing and having a long-term approach to the industry. If we don't get that free trade deal, it's all at risk. Therefore, I say it again today, we need three champions for the motor industry back in Westminster. We need Colleen, Jim and myself back there battling for the deal we need, battling for the motor industry, and with a bit of luck, that's where we'll be. Thank you all very much.
Can I say, first of all, what a real pleasure it is to be back in Coventry, this great city, this great industrial city, great cathedral city, and this great city of two major universities. And I'm delighted to see the progress of Coventry University, formed as a design college 147 years ago, a university 25 years ago, now 30,000 students itself, an expanding university in technology, engineering, design, and one that makes me very proud to be here in Coventry today. And I'm very proud to be here with three great candidates who will be standing for Labour at the coming general election. Three people who know Coventry well, three people who have served Coventry with distinction, three people who I will show you why you need them in the House of Commons, and you need them to fight for all the needs that Coventry have in the future. Colleen, who was born here, at school here, at college here, a councillor here, now a great MP for her constituency area, and I know that she will serve the constituency brilliantly if you choose to return her on June the 8th. And Jim Cunningham, who was the leader of the council as well as a councillor for many years, and worked with me in Parliament for 25 years, a great member of Parliament, always attentive to the needs of his constituency, always speaking up in the Parliament of Westminster for the needs of Coventry. And I'm here also with Geoffrey Robinson, and I want to tell you something about the contribution that he has made, not just when he was the Chief Executive and Managing Director of Jaguar Cars and served the car industry so well, and as an MP and advisor to Harold Wilson when he was Prime Minister, but what he achieved as a government minister in the 1990s when he came in to put through vital legislation that changed the face of Britain. I worked with Geoffrey, first of all, on what was called the windfall tax. And some of you may remember, we taxed the privatised utilities £5 billion to pay for the New Deal for young people and the long-term unemployed to get back into work. And it was a unique piece of legislation, never before done, a windfall tax on the privatised utilities, very complex, very difficult to do, And then, of course, their generosity in being so good at paying it and wanting to help the young unemployed. And it was Jeffrey who devised that. It was Jeffrey who did all the hard work to make that possible. It was Jeffrey who raised that $5 billion by the work he did. And I've got to apologise to Jeffrey, because he always told me when I was Chancellor, look, Gordon, you could get $6 billion. You shouldn't go for $5 billion, you should go for $6 billion. And Jeffrey was right. We should have taken that extra billion to help people back into work. And then what happened? As a result of it, 2 million young people into work. 2 million of the long-term unemployed got into work. And once we did the minimum wage, we were able to get 2 million low-paid workers up to a level of income that was far better than ever before. And so the Welfare to Work programme derived from the amazing work that Jeffrey did. And then we said we had to do something about pensioners. And you may remember in 1997, a third of pensioners in this country were in poverty. It's a terrible figure to think that 1 in every 3 elderly people were in poverty and unable to meet the costs of basic necessities. So Jeffrey and I thought, we've got to do something in addition to the basic pension, so we set up the pension credit, which 2 million pensioners are now benefiting from, taking them out of poverty. And then we thought we had to do something for all pensioners, so then we said this Christmas bonus is not good enough, so we'll create the winter allowance. And so the winter allowance, Jeffrey then went round all the privatised utilities again and asked them to be generous again in giving money for the winter allowance. But in the end, the Treasury paid for the winter allowance, which with the pension tax credit has been responsible for reducing pensioner poverty from 33% of the population to just around 10% when we left office. And my sadness, and this is one of the reasons why you need the 3 champions in Westminster, is that pensioner poverty is starting to rise again. And the prediction is that by 2022, if Mrs May is re-elected, another 400,000 elderly people will be pushed into poverty. So there's one very good reason to elect Colleen and Jeffrey and Jim. If you want to end pensioner poverty, you need Labour MPs fighting for it, and you need your 3 representatives from Coventry doing that, and I hope you will support them to do that at the election. Now, Mrs May has called an election on a single issue. And I was thinking back, and some of you here may remember and some of you not, the last time a Prime Minister called an election on a single issue, it was Edward Heath in 1974. And he had a simple question. He said, who governs the country? And the answer came back, not Edward Heath. He was thrown out of office. And Mrs May says she wants this single issue election to strengthen her hand with Europe. But as Jeffrey has just said, we don't know what her hand is. She is not telling us what her hand is in these negotiations. And it is to be at the cost of manufacturing, at the cost of the car industry, and at the cost of jobs, if we are not told what we are voting for on June the 8th. She wants a free hand. She wants us to write her a blank cheque. She wants us to give her, if she was going to use the language in French, carte blanche, to do exactly what she wants. Now, nobody in this city can afford to give a Prime Minister a blank cheque when the jobs of car workers, when the future of manufacturing, when the prospects of young people are a central issue in this election, and they must be addressed. And Jeffrey is absolutely right. There are 45,000 people employed by Jaguar Land Rover in the West Midlands. There are 170,000 people employed in the car industry throughout the whole of the United Kingdom. There are nearly 800,000 people who are dependent on these jobs in the supply industry, in the industries servicing the car industry. There are 2.7 million men and women employed in manufacturing industry. And they need to have answers before this election about what is to happen to manufacturing in these European negotiations. And you will need champions in the House of Commons, Jim and Colleen and Jeffrey, to speak up for the needs of manufacturing industry in the Midlands, and particularly the needs of people in Coventry. You know, we hear a lot about the European Court of Justice and how we must push that out of the way. We hear a lot about the customs union and the bureaucracy. We hear a lot about the single market and why it's not right for Britain to stay part of that. But which minister and which Conservative candidates are talking about the future of manufacturing industry? Who are talking about the future of the car industry and how much it depends on trade with the European Union? Who are talking from the government about the apprenticeships and about the young people whose future should lie in the car industry but whose jobs may be at risk? And as Jeffrey rightly said, I've looked at opinion polls too on these issues, and whether you're a Leave voter or whether you were a Remain voter, everyone agrees almost unanimously that it's in the interest of Britain to negotiate free trade with the European Union so that we can sell our cars, we can sell our pharmaceuticals, we can sell our manufacturing products without taxation as you enter the European Union, without customs regulations that prevent things getting through quickly, and without rules of origin, which is a technical term, preventing us selling British cars to third countries outside the European Union. So manufacturing has got to be on the ballot paper. The future of the car industry has got to be on the ballot paper. The future of jobs have got to be on the ballot paper. And there are three things that we must demand that this government do. And there are three reasons, therefore, why you need advocates in the House of Commons who will speak up for the car and manufacturing industries of this country and who will not be silenced because they're part of a Conservative party in the House of Commons. They will speak up for the needs of Coventry and the needs of the people in this region. The first thing we need is tariff-free access to the European Union. If there are tariffs, there would be 10%. So the cost of a car selling into Europe would be £1,000, £2,000, £3,000 more. It would make us less competitive and perhaps even make us uncompetitive. And you know how many cars go from Britain to the European Union every year? To mainland Europe. Half the cars that are produced in Britain are sold into mainland Europe, and most of the cars produced in Britain are sold to other countries and exported abroad. That's the difference from the old regime in the 1960s and 70s. Our car industry has been reborn, selling cars into some of the most competitive markets in the world, in the European Union, beating the Germans, beating the French, beating other countries in our ability to produce cars that people want to buy in the European Union. But tariffs and taxes on these cars make it very much more difficult for Jaguar Land Rover and for any of the other car manufacturers to sell. So we must say, we need champions in the House of Commons who will say we cannot allow the car industry to have tariffs and taxes imposed on it simply because some people refuse to work with the European Union and the single market. And the second thing we need, as Jeffrey himself said, we need frictionless access for parts and components to move freely back and forward from Europe. You know, 40% of the cars, of what is in the cars produced in Britain, come from components and parts that are made in the rest of Europe. So parts are going back and forward, components are going back and forward from Europe into Britain, back to Europe, back to Britain, and a car is made up from a global, but particularly a European supply chain. So you can't have vast customs rules and regulations, otherwise you're going to slow up the production of cars. It's just been said by Ford today that they would have to reconsider all their plans if there were these regulations and rules preventing them being able to get their components and parts back and forward as quickly as possible. So we need members of Parliament who are attentive to the needs of the car industry, not dogma-ridden on the question of Europe, but willing to say this is necessary for the car industry, this is necessary for manufacturing. And we also need something that allows us to sell our cars to third countries. And that's how people see these cars. If they're British cars, but with European parts, they've still got to be seen as British cars and able to enter places that are outside the European Union where we want to buy. And so for these three reasons, we need advocates, we need champions. And the best champions, the best advocates of manufacturing in the car industry are the three people that you've got before you today who will stand up and fight for the car industry and manufacturing in the House of Commons. And it's not... And you know, Mrs. May want to fight a general election on one theme, but as Edward Heath found in 1974, he wanted to fight on one issue, but people wanted to talk also about what matters at a general election. You're choosing a government for 5 years. What are they going to do about security and defence?